My father left on April 29th, 1975, like the day before Saigon fell, because he got some information from a student, a beloved student, and he was a teacher, and I think because students love and respect their teachers, his student gave him some information and was like, you need to leave now. It's time to go. And you have to go now, like in the next 24 hours.
You are now listening to Highline's newest social justice podcast, Safer Sound. In this radio show, we will open our minds and our hearts to new perspectives and new people. Let's explore together the meaning of creating true, safe spaces in the Puget Sound and our local areas, especially through a transformative justice lens. Transformative justice is all about getting to the root of the systemic issues that continue to threaten the safety of our communities, not just physical, but also psychological and emotional safety. We want to see a more safe and more harmonious future for everyone in the Puget Sound region. Shout out to the Highline Heritage Museum for serving as our home base, and to One America 106.5 Low Power FM for offering this beautiful and unique space for us to have this show. We also want to give a shout out to Washington State Historical Society for sponsoring and making this show possible. Thank you so much for tuning in. My name is Tian Van, and I'm so excited to talk with you. Almost exactly 50 years ago, on April 30th, from now in the year 2025, the capital of South Vietnam was taken by North Vietnam, ending the Vietnamese War and leading to the merging of both South and North Vietnam. For those living outside of Vietnam, like moi, the event of April 1975 may be considered a controversial subject, particularly within the Vietnamese diaspora, also known as Viet Kieu. It was an event that left almost 2 million Vietnamese to flee their country, and it also marks a really significant day for Vietnamese people all over the world, whether you're Viet Kieu or you're Người Việt who still live in the homeland. It's a day that goes by many names, depending on your perspective. Reunification Day, Ngày Thống Nhất, which is primarily used in Vietnam, while the term Fall of Saigon is typically used in Western accounts. But it's also called Black April, Tháng Tư Đen. So it really is a polarizing subject in some Vietnamese communities, depending on your upbringing and where you're from. But I'm sure we can all agree on some things. Families were separated, lives were lost, new beginnings were written, and even after the war, suffering endured. But so did the spirit of the Vietnamese people, and it is also here with you right now, in me, and through the work of Washington local and Orange County baby, Tina Huynh. So Tina is originally from Cali, but we are so blessed to have her here in Washington as a local. She's a musician, an educator, a scholar, a filmmaker. She wears a lot of hats, and she plays a mean flute. This is my girl, my Viet sister, J. Tina. I want you to tune in to the special that we have that I'm so excited to be offering to you. It's a part of her story. She talks a lot about what she's been discovering. So tune in to find out what she has found in her endless pursuit to discover and untangle the living histories of our people all across the world. Oh yeah, and did I mention I was Vietnamese? Hello, everyone. My name is Tian Van, and this is Safer Sound. I am so excited to introduce this next guest because she really is just such an amazing and talented person. I want to tell y'all about how I met her, which was through the Tacoma Refugee Choir. And that choir specifically was created for immigrants and refugees to create a welcoming experience through music where people could sing together. And it really is such a great organization, great group to check out if you like music and you're interested in joining. So shout out to Tacoma Refugee Choir.
Woo.
Yes, and that's how I met Tina actually. But so much more than that. Tina is an educator at the University of Puget Sound. How long have you been there actually?
This is my 6th year.
Oh, okay. Yeah, okay. You've been here for a while, and I know
Yeah.
that you're originally from Cali, is it?
Yeah,
Or- Okay.
originally from Southern California, Orange County.
Ooh, rep Orange County. That's where all the Vietnamese people are.
That's right. Yeah.
And as well, Tina's also an author too. And I actually did some research. I Google searched you.
Oh, okay.
I Googled Tina just to see what she's all about, and I apparently she's an author, which I knew about the songbook, but there was another one recently.
Yeah,
that
the
you just came out
songbook.
with.
So the Vietnamese children's songbook is an ebook, and it's for music educators because I'm a music education professor, and it's also for Vietnamese families or anybody who is interested in learning about Vietnamese children's songs. And then, oh, by the way, there's a physical copy of that coming out soon.
Ooh.
So it should be like in a month or two. Super excited. So yeah, there's the ebook that existed that came out in 2023, and now we're having the physical book come out. But the one I think that you're talking about is remembering musical childhoods in Vietnam, 1931 through 1975, which is
Yes.
a scholarly book, and it is about basically me interviewing and following 6 Vietnamese immigrants, refugees, and one person who is from Vietnam who never left the country for comparison, comparison of stories, and basically what their childhoods were like when they were growing up in Vietnam, up until when they left, which was around 1975, of course, the fall of Saigon or the end of the Vietnam War.
Wow, I love that you were including that perspective as well, in addition to like, so I guess sort of the American Vietnamese American Viet Kieu perspective.
Yes, and that's a lot of what I study and talk about in my research. So as a music person, there's the musical aspect, which is I'm very interested in children's learning of music and teaching of music, and then also Vietnamese children's music, but also music of many cultures. And then I'm also interested in our own Vietnamese diaspora and how people ended up, Vietnamese people ended up across the globe, and how they do music. Like, how do different Vietnamese communities around the world make music, which is very interesting, as I'm starting to find out, because I traveled to France and Germany last fall and visited a couple of folks who are from the Vietnamese community, or visited Vietnamese temples and just kind of sang with them and just kind of see what songs they know, because when you leave a country, you bring your songs with you, but not everybody knows the same songs, right? So in a certain country, you might have a bunch of people who know this song, and then that becomes popular in that region. Like in Southern California, everybody knows Rước đèn tháng 8, which is Tết Trung Thu rước đèn đi chơi, em rước đèn đi, right? But when I asked a community in Europe, they were like, we don't really know that song. And I was shocked because I knew that song from my childhood. Like, everybody knows that
this song.
Yeah, everybody. Are you really Vietnamese? Like, like everybody knows this song. So it was eye-opening to realize that whatever songs you have get passed on, and if you don't have those songs in your repertoire, they don't get passed on. Which is that's a whole nother story, right? Like how we hold on to our culture and what parts of culture do we hold on to and sustain? Well, it depends on what we know, right? When we're in this new place. So
Wow.
well, that's kind of what I do when I'm not teaching straight
do a
up like
lot.
music ed. Yeah.
Well, you're also working on films too, or
Yeah.
at least you have two finished films. The first one that you made was that Songs of Little Saigon.
Yes.
That came first.
Yeah.
And then that was based on musicians out of the Orange County area, Vietnamese Americans who are sort of carrying on the legacy of music from Vietnam to here. So that was a really great film to watch. And another film that I think is especially interesting for folks who are local to the Washington area is called A Resting Place, and is more about the Vietnamese community and the part of the cemetery that they have reserved for them to carry out the traditions of burial and things such as that. So I unfortunately did not. I actually tried to make that film at the Tacoma Library and I showed up late, but I'm so glad I made it to hear your story and hear a little bit more about your family, which I would
glad
love to
you
share.
showed up. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad you showed up. I was so excited. I'm like, oh my gosh, we haven't seen each other in so long. But yeah, that one you as in everyone, can watch that because it's freely streaming on crpftacoma.org / or do they say backslash or do they say / I'm not sure, community. And that project, The Resting Place, came out of funding from CRPF, Chinese Reconciliation Project Foundation, which was funded by Tacoma Creates. That was the grant that they got, and the proposal was to create a series of short documentaries about different Asian communities in Tacoma. And so when you go to crpftacoma.org / community, you'll see 4 or 5 films. They're all around 20-ish minutes that are about different parts of Tacoma. So like a Chinese community, the Japanese community, I think Cambodian, and then my part was contributing to a documentary about the Vietnamese community. And the cemetery that the association, the Vietnamese association, was able to gather plots of land for, to purchase plots of land for when people pass away, was Mountain View. So there's a big lot out there that's dedicated to Vietnamese community members. And so that's the special thing about that, is that they got together and they secured this land, and there's a place for you to be when you pass away. I think it's very special.
Yes. I've been there before quite a few times because my father is buried there.
Oh.
But also, it really is such a special place because I know that before having this space, the community really didn't have a specific place. They had to sort of fit themselves into whatever was available to them. But that's why I think is so unique about the movie A Resting Place, as well as the plots at Mountain View, is it allows the Vietnamese community to carry out their traditions and really have a central place for those who are from Vietnam, instead of feeling like they have to sort of assimilate, all sort of adjust to the traditions of burial that we have here in America. And I thought that was really interesting that you literally produced a film about it. Was you mainly the producer for it, or were there other hats that you wore?
Yeah, I was the producer, and also I guess you could say like the cultural consultant, because I was the Vietnamese person on our small team of 3. The director was Kate Drasner Hoyt, and then Hallie was also working on the team as editor and like kind of co-editor. They both edited, and shot the film together. And then I created the interview questions, and so kind of together we like worked out this narrative of like, what is the cemetery, why do we have it, and how did the Vietnamese community come upon this, like how did this happen, so I was the producer for that, but also the executive producers who really were the people who sought out funding were Teresa Panhosley and Greg Utes from CRPF. So it's kind of this kind of group effort. So I'm very honored to have been asked to do that.
Yes. Yeah. It sounds like a team effort that produced something really amazing. I'm really glad that you were able to document that place and document the stories around it, because so often we don't get to hear those. Especially in my experience with the generations before me, for my mom's generation, I think they're a little more hesitant to be open and speak on their experiences from the war, which we will be talking about today. And what I forgot to mention is today I wanted to dedicate this show to the fall of Saigon, or the anniversary of the fall of Saigon, which is April 30th, 1975. And this year is actually the 50th anniversary for the fall of Saigon, which is really crazy to think about because that's not that long ago.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, in a way, it's like, okay, it's not that long ago, meaning like we just got here. We, as in the Vietnamese refugee community, right? And children of. But then if you think about it, it's like 50 years is like half of a person's lifetime ish, which is a long time. You know, when you think about the people, you know, our elders, I guess, who are in their 60s, 70s, 80s, like they've lived now more than half of their lives, more of their lives here in the US than they did in Vietnam. And that's, I think for them, that's like a really big deal, you know.
Yes. And I would actually really like to get into your story because I found your story so interesting in through your father's experience. And I think you mentioned that you were brought over here as a child or as a baby, right? Like before
My
you...
sister was.
Oh, it was
Yeah.
your sister?
Yeah.
Okay, okay. Do you mind sharing a little bit about that?
Oh, I don't mind.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So I will just jump right in. So my father left on April 29th, 1975, like the day before Saigon fell, because he got some information from a student, a beloved student, and he was a teacher, you know. And I think because, you know, students love and respect their teachers, his student gave him some information and was like, you need to leave now. You know, it's time to go. And you have to go now, like within in the next 24 hours. And so do what you need to do. And he ran back home, and I mean, like not literally, but you know, he went home, which was to his parents' house, which was a couple hours south, and knocked on the door and wanted to let them know, like, we need to leave, or like I'm leaving, you know, and I'm gonna do this thing. I'm leaving the country, but no one answered the door. I mean, he was an adult. He was in his 30s or late 20s at that time, and he was already living apart from his family. So he was coming home to tell them, but no one was home, and so he had to leave, and he didn't even tell them that he was leaving. He wanted to tell them, but he didn't have that opportunity. Couldn't reach them. Yeah, and so he left, everything he had, and literally, like, you hear stories about people saying, like, I left without anything, like with the shirt on my back, and that's it, and that's what he did. He had one picture of him in his uniform because he fought for the South, and
which sort of made him a target.
Exactly,
in a way.
which is why he had
Which
to
is
leave.
why he had to leave
Yeah.
the way he did.
Yeah.
Okay.
And he had this one photograph of him with these other like officers, and then like he had a certificate, I think, from like his days in schooling, and that's all he had. That I know of, that I've seen. Right. And then his brothers ended up staying behind, and they ended up in re-education camp. And we know that what that means, like, it's really Tho, which is prison, for, 6, 7, 9 years, depending on the brother. They stayed there for a very long time. Were malnourished, just things that they won't talk about because it's too painful. My oldest uncle, one day we were eating in the kitchen, and he said, just suddenly, like randomly, he said, when I was in re-education camp, I ate little bugs because that's all there was. That's all we had, and we would have like a very tiny bit of rice for the whole day. And so, like when we came across bugs, we would eat them. And I was like, okay,
Cool.
I always wanted to ask, but then it's weird because how do you ask about something that is so painful? So then, like, I don't ask, but I wanted to ask, and then one day he's just suddenly volunteers this information. I'm like, oh my gosh, I wanted to hear more, but like I didn't know what to say to, as a young person. I was probably like in my teens. I just didn't know what to say to like say, can you tell me more?
Oh, you were a teen, so you're like, what is
I'm
going
like,
on?
what? Yeah. So
Like,
there's
what
that.
happened?
Yeah, I mean, then little by little, I think as time goes on, it becomes more of a memory. So people are maybe a little bit more open to telling their stories. Um, and so now we have people who, we have films of people who are willing to tell their stories. We have oral histories. We have, written documents of people, who want to preserve their stories for people to know. But I think it's really painful, for the last 50 years. It's something that people don't really talk about. Like,
It
did your
sounds
parents talk about it?
painful. Nothing.
Yeah.
No, I haven't. I think I've tried to ask my mom about it, but she's only open to talking about everything that happened after we arrived
Yeah.
here, which I think tells me enough. Tells me that things are so painful or just very difficult to talk about and brings up really strong feelings. So I try to empathize with that and not force her as well.
Yeah.
So I completely identify with your experience of not trying to push the envelope too much, but there is that curiosity of where do we come from?
Yeah.
And I feel like even with your uncle showing or telling this example of him eating bugs, it shows a lot. It tells a lot about their experience and how they're being treated. So I think it's a way of, it's just about how we learn to interpret these things and the gifts or the knowledge that they pass on to us, those stories. Every little bit matters. And I think that's something that you were able to explore too in your films about the fall of Saigon, as well as Songs of Little Saigon. And I think that, yeah, those films are really great. The film that I saw, which was the Songs of Little Saigon, literally made me cry because it was so resonating with me, and just me thinking about my people and really identifying with that experience and thinking about how people who look like me, who look like my father and my sister, were being targeted and being killed by their own people as well. And you just sort of this basically a civil war
Yeah.
going on with the addition of the American forces as well.
Yeah. It's really tough. It's very painful, and it's also something hard to explain to people who maybe don't have a family history of these kinds of stories. Like when I try to explain to my students, I ask them to imagine if you're in like where you live, you don't know among your neighbors. Like you look around, you don't know, if they are, going to disagree with you or not, like if you should feel safe around them or not. It's a very uncomfortable place to be, and it is the feeling of not feeling safe, right? Like you just don't know who,
just from
who to
both
trust.
sides, even like no
Yeah.
matter what side you were on, there was
Yeah.
like this unsettling feeling because at one point the country was so polarized or so split from the north to the south, which nowadays is not so much after the fall of Saigon, but I know that before that there was that distinction there, and people sort of had to choose sides.
Yeah. And I think that's the hard thing, is like you choose a side, and then when the time comes, if your side lost, it's like, well, okay, I guess we're out of here, and so all these people left, and you have like people who fled by plane, people who fled by boat, who I think are famously known as boat people.
Yeah.
People who fled by foot, of whom like so many died, because the jungles are treacherous and whatnot. So all these different ways of trying to leave, and just imagine like how many people died just trying to leave, just trying to find safety, and they could never find safety, you know. And then we have those who did. So in 75, it was just over 130,000 people that year who left, who were able to flee Vietnam. And then that was the first wave. The first wave of people who left were between 75 and 1977.
Right.
And then after that, we consider that the second wave, and like a lot of people who left by boat and had experienced communist rule for a couple years and realized that this is not for me, right? So they're leaving. So this couple of decades after 75, when people were leaving, that's a lot. That's like, 2-3 million people who fled. And then you also have the neighboring countries who are also going through fear of political persecution, like Laos and Cambodia.
Yes.
And during that time, scholars say that was, at the time, the largest refugee crisis in history. Well, then you have, fast forward to 2016 and what's happening in Europe and all these people fleeing from war as well. Then that became the largest refugee crisis in history, So unfortunately, I guess you could say history repeats itself. But we try our best to work against that, right? We try to have humane societies where people can be respected and not persecuted. But I don't know if that is just a dream, or
No,
if it's achievable at some
say
point.
that.
Is that achievable?
We gotta hope for the best, or
Yeah.
because once hope dies, then what left?
That's true.
You're basically giving in. So
Yeah.
I know that hope is really important, and hope is what carried our families through.
True. Yeah, hope and
Especially your
perseverance,
family.
right? Like, just keep going at it. Just keep going. I know so many people suffered so much, like on the boats, or once they made it to the new country, whichever country it was, they tried so hard, and here we are now, right? And so I'm thankful for my family and parents who made it, and then all the people who made it, who then made a community that we could grow up in and thrive in, and like still learn about our values and about our culture, our culture's values. Have a sense of identity, have some sort of unity.
Yes, and I definitely agree that we sort of have our own special experience here, or especially in America, or any sort of overseas Vietnamese person, wherever they've settled, have an experience unique to that wherever they came from and wherever they moved to. Sort of like how when you went to France and
Yeah.
got to know them. Were there any things that you noticed that sort of united us in terms of qualities or the stories that you heard?
I would say everybody, coming to a new country, whatever country that may be, right? Most Vietnamese refugees came to the U.S., but you also have France, Germany, the U.K., Australia, lots of Vietnamese Australians, and then even smaller countries like Norway, and there are Vietnamese communities in Japan.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I know,
I
right?
didn't know. Dang, we're everywhere. I think I
Yeah.
did read at one point that the Vietnamese population is one of the largest diaspora in terms of like how widely we spread. Like we're kind of sort of
Wow.
everywhere.
Wow, yeah.
Yeah.
It's incredible. And wherever we land, we kind of take up, because it's enculturation, we take up a little bit of the culture that we're surrounded by, right? So Vietnamese American identity is very different from like Vietnamese French and Vietnamese German, It's really interesting to meet all these folks who are very different, yet we have the same story in terms of like how we left or why we left, for better opportunities, for a safer place, for for a safer life, Yeah.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you, let's see. Well, I wanted to talk to you about your experiences with teaching as well, because I know that you bring into your teaching a lot of your experiences as a Vietnamese American person and really having culturally responsive teaching. I wanted to talk to you about the challenges that folks like you of color or anyone who's trying to incorporate more culturally aware education into their teaching, what sort of challenges have you seen with that, especially with music, being a music educator?
Yeah, I would say that the biggest challenge is not knowing about a culture. And that is the biggest task, is to learn about all of the students in a person's classroom and their culture, their background, their interests, because those can be different things. So let's just take a Vietnamese American child, hypothetically. They have a background that we were just talking about, right? Maybe their parents are refugees or immigrants. And so they have certain, family history that is about that. And that can be like, you could say, I guess you could say, like, that can be perhaps lead to an understanding of musically, because music education is, there's two aspects to culturally responsive teaching in music education. There's the culture part, like, and I'm talking about like ethnic culture, right? But then there's like the musical culture. So a student who is Vietnamese American, or our hypothetical student, may be Vietnamese, yet may or may not listen to Vietnamese music, and may or may not speak Vietnamese language, right? And so I think the biggest challenge for teachers is to find out about that student, like what is their background and how much do they connect and identify with that ethnic heritage. Because we have a lot of Vietnamese students who may not even listen to Vietnamese music. They may not even like it. And I think the assumption that a lot of music teachers, I wouldn't say a lot, but some music teachers make mistakenly is, oh, I have Vietnamese American students in my classroom, therefore I will try to pull some Vietnamese songs to try to connect with them. But
Like just making that assumption.
yeah, but it's not always that's not always the way, right? It's not always what's true. Maybe that student's really into something else, right? Like
personal
top
preferences.
40
Yeah.
American songs, or country, or like grunge, or hip hop and rap. Like there's so many different genres of music that a student, especially one living in America, is surrounded by so many genres that they're listening to. And most likely it's not Vietnamese music, right? But maybe they do identify with Vietnamame music. Maybe their family in the home plays Vietnamese music.
Or Paris by Night.
Or Paris by Night, right? Like maybe
Yeah.
they have some background. So you just never know, and that goes for every culture. So I think the key is, when you're teaching students and you want to connect with them, it's really like you just have to learn about them. Like every individual is different, and that's the biggest
The
challenge.
individual.
Yeah.
And not just make generalizations like, oh,
Right.
you're Vietnamese or you're Latino, so I'm just gonna assume these things about you. It sounds
Yeah.
like you really take into consideration people's personal experience, and it sounds like those who are fortunate to have you as their instructor are very fortunate, because I can tell that you're really taking into account their personal experiences, which I think is so rare in education in America here, because it's sort of like, it feels, especially in the public education system, maybe more so before college, it feels very generalized, and you really sort of got to fit yourself into the system and the culture. So I really love this contrast of how you're sort of fitting yourself to the needs of your students.
Yeah, thank you. And I also feel like it is a big challenge, specifically for music teachers, because not just because of the dual problem that you have of like the issue of like cultural identity, ethnicity, and musical preference, but also that I would say I forgot. I just forgot. There was another point, and then I went backwards, and then I forgot what I was going to say.
No, it's okay. We've been talking about a lot. I mean, wow, just talking about the war, I think, and I'm sure you feel this too. Is like there's this heaviness here that I feel, even though we're here and we're privileged to be here, especially compared to our parents, but there still is that story that those feelings, unprocessed feelings that we feel that are carried on through our lineage, and I think that's something that we should talk about more. Is sort of this experience of intergenerational trauma even, and how these stories and things, they don't just die with the people who experience them, they get passed on, and through really indirect ways. And I think me and you now are sort of feeling that even to this day, and really just trying to dig deeper, understand our story, our people, and that history, which can be really hard because there was a lot of death, there was a lot of stories about refugees really escaping, like not even just death, but like after they leave, the dangers that they face. For example, if you were a quote unquote boat person and took a boat here, you still had these other fears of dying at sea, or having your ship or slash boat be taken on by pirates,
Yes.
and all types of things. Just really, really heavy stuff.
Yeah, for
So
sure. Yeah, we haven't even talked
yeah.
about that. Oh my gosh, the
There's so
perils at
much to
sea. You have
explore.
so
Oh
many
my
stories of people, yeah, encountering pirates and like what that was like, especially if you're a woman. You know, I mean, there's so many horror stories. And I just wonder, do people realize that? Because it's like when you go out daily life, we don't talk about these things. So like, who knows about these? Who knows? Unless you tell this story, these kind of stories remain hidden or secret. But being attacked by pirates while you're in the middle of the sea and trying to get to like the Philippines, to the refugee camp, it's like, who knows about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's not really something you start off a conversation like, hey, like, I escaped my country by boat. That's how I got here.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like a lot of what I've seen from our Vietnamese community, people really trying to move past it,
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, I
And
think
yeah, I
that
think
is
look beyond
definitely,
it.
yeah, something that people talk about. And I think there are some people who who are attached to the past, like they can't get past it. And then there are other people who are like, I just want to get past that. Like, let's just move forward and close that chapter, and let's not talk about it, and let's talk about like what's ahead of us rather than what's behind us. So, and it's just people, right? People deal with trauma and war in different ways. Like some people hang on to it and they have PTSD, and they have some really deep seated issues that may or may not be resolved. And then other people are just like moving forward, and living their best selves, right? So it all depends, I think. And each of those is a unique story. I think if someone was to meet a Vietnamese immigrant or refugee, everybody's story would be different. I mean, aside from, and the way that they deal with the future is different, or the present and the future is different, right? Aside from, like, yes, we all experienced collectively this exodus, yes, but then when you move forward, people have different ways of moving forward. Like, for instance, some people refuse to go back to Vietnam,
Yes.
right? After 75 or after whenever they left.
Yes.
They're like, I'm never going back. And then other people are like, I'm going back every year and I'm going to visit my family. Maybe they still have family there. Or maybe they're like, well, it's not like what it's not so bad. Let's do business there because it's good to do business there for whatever reason, right? So you have such a different array of people who decide to move forward in different ways.
I really appreciate you bringing that up because I think even to this day, with war still happening, and it is so relevant to this day, even though this is something that happened 50 years ago, people are still experiencing these things, experiencing war, experiencing loss, and having to flee their countries to this day, literally right now as we speak. So that's why I really appreciate you putting in that effort to tell these stories. Like you said, I think a lot of our stories go untold, and we sort of, unless someone asks about it, we really just hold on to it and internalize those memories, and
Yeah.
that can weigh really heavy on our hearts. And I feel like through your films, you've given us a voice, given not just one singular voice, but an array of voices that illustrate a range of experiences and really show the diversity within the Vietnamese community as well, which I think is so important, because over here in America, I think we try to generalize
Yeah.
a lot, like Asian people, which can be so many types of ethnicities, or even just Vietnamese people, because when you get into that, like we were talking about earlier, there's that separation of quote unquote north and south and even central, if you want to take that into consideration, and really tells a story about the range of experiences that we have.
Yeah, for sure. And speaking of like the different, like within Vietnamese people, the different nuances, like when you left counts, right? And then if you're where you're from, like did you leave? Were you northern or were you southern, or that counts so to speak. It counts to identify who you are in like your context, right? And then like if you were a refugee or if you were an immigrant, because if you're a refugee, then that's one thing. But if you're an immigrant, that's slightly different, right? You left a little bit later,
Yes.
And then there's the if you were from the north, like which year did you leave? Like so many distinctions. So if you left the north before 1954, well, that's a whole different story. You fled the north to come to the south. But if you are a northerner after 75, oh, that's a whole different thing, right? So there's so many distinctions that we make amongst each other as Vietnamese people that I think outsiders, people who are not Vietnamese, like most of them probably don't know.
Yeah, they can't even perceive it.
Yeah.
On top of it's already hard for us to share our stories,
Yeah.
and now you're putting on a spotlight onto these stories. I really loved in the Songs of Little Saigon how you really zoomed in and talked about each individual person's experience, not just with coming here, but with music. And one thing I noticed about their experience in Vietnam was music and expressing yourself and just creativity in that way wasn't really encouraged. It was something that they had to really commit and seek out and almost make sacrifices for in order to pursue their passions with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Musicians, another marginalized group within Vietnamese society. Like there are so many ways to be marginalized by any society, right? But musicians in particular need a voice, and that's why I felt that it was important to share their stories. Because have you ever heard of a documentary about Vietnamese musicians, who are refugees, and what their stories were? Like maybe not. And so, there are archives of many oral histories, but they don't focus necessarily on music specifically. And as a musician and an advocate of music and music education, like, of course, that's what I would do, because it's important to bring out, these are the people who, to bring out their stories, because they're the people who build the community. In Little Saigon, in Orange County, in Southern California, that enclave, it is rich with culture, musical culture, because of these people, but they go often unrecognized and unthanked, because they're musicians, and they kind of go under the radar. Maybe, they're just not as recognized. But the people who are in the film, one served the community as a youth orchestra director, right? So serving the youth. Another composed, and he's very well known, but he contributes to the community in many different ways and is a big advocate for doing something in your community and not just like taking but giving back, right? Then we have someone who is singing for the community and contributes in so many ways, and just by being active in the community and being a face that people recognize and see, that people want to come together to see, to hear, sing, like that it alone creates community too. The piano studio owner creates community. She has over 200 students who are always in the studio, and that in itself is like sustaining the culture of piano playing, of course, like piano music education, but then also is a central point in Little Saigon around which people can take music and come together. So many different ways of creating community and sustaining the richness of Vietnamese who make music, and without these people, like for instance, without these teachers, and you have also the traditional Vietnamese instrument professors, the two.
Yes. But wasn't one of the people you interviewed, wasn't that your teacher at
Yes.
one point? Because I think he
Several of them.
mentioned you.
Yes,
Like,
yes.
my student's Tina. I was like, I know her.
Yeah, actually, Tai Hong, Nguyen Can Hong, he is the orchestra director of the youth group. And so I first started out as one of his students, one of his orchestra members as a teenager. And then eventually he asked me to be his assistant conductor. So I then took over and I started conducting the youth orchestra. But then I, eventually I had to move, so I wasn't able to be active like that anymore. But still play, I still played with them when I could. And their 30, this is the Vietnamese American Philharmonic, their 30th anniversary is coming up. 30 years of existence. So they're going to play a big, 30th anniversary concert. So I will be there to commemorate that as well.
I want to
So
go. What is
very
this?
exciting. I think it's August 9th, 2025. But it's in Southern California, so you're going to have to make a flight.
So exactly 20 years
30.
after, or 30.
Yeah.
The math, I didn't do my math right. don't believe the stereotypes about Asians in math, because I did not. Yes, exactly 30 years after the fall of Saigon.
Yeah, true. I mean, yeah.
Or approximately.
Well, I guess you could say it's 30 years this year. So he started it 20 years after the fall of Saigon.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So he was my teacher. And then the piano studio owner was also my teacher. I started piano lessons with her when I was, I think, 6. Yeah. So some of these folks I knew, like half of them, I would say I knew, or maybe more than half. But yeah, they all contributed to the community in different ways,
And contributed to you and like where you're at now. Now you're an educator.
Yes, absolutely. And so I'm very grateful for them. I'm thankful for the education that I got from them, not just musically, but it's like more than about music. It's about the community that you're surrounded by, right? I mean, people say it takes a village to raise a child. Well, it certainly does, because it's not just one music teacher. It was like multiple people around me who created a rich environment full of opportunities for me to play and learn in that, in Little Saigon. So, yeah, I'm very grateful for that.
And they're still playing.
They are. They are still playing and teaching and singing and conducting and composing, all of them. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for answering all my questions. I wanted to see...
Welcome.
Well, I wanted to just do like some wrap-up questions.
Sure.
And no pressure to answer these and with a lengthy response. But I just wanted to ask you, just in general, like your opinions on things. Like, for example, I want to ask you, what is something that you wish that all people in the world, like a rule, if you had to set a rule, what would that rule be?
What would that
everyone
rule
had to
be?
follow?
Oh, I would say to be humane. To be humane to others. I think a lot of people say like to be kind to others. And I think, yeah, absolutely be kind to others. But This is, I think of the word humane because when we were talking about re-education camps, which were actually, the Vietnamese call them,
Concentration camps.
yeah,
Oh
they
yeah.
call them like prison, right? That was so inhumane, to not feed people, to force them to the point where they were eating bugs. And it's so close to my heart because these are my family members, and so it really hurts to think that they had to suffer in this way, in such an inhumane space, that they were treated inhumanely. So I would say, if there was one rule for the whole world, to just please be humane to people.
I love that because it's something that I think is so bare minimum, but for some reason it feels like it's so hard in this day
Yeah.
and age because we're so just we're just go 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 and we all each got our own projects and agendas, but sometimes we forget like we're human first, and
Yeah.
we're just here, like we're here and we're human, and we're not just the product of what we do and what we create, but also we are who we are. And I really appreciate that
Yeah.
outlook. I also wanted to ask you a word of advice that you might have for other folks who are listening, whether it be them having, whether or not they're Vietnamese, folks who might have an interest in music and really exploring that through a cultural lens. What words do you have for them, advice or encouragement about exploring their roots in that way?
Oh, I would say, it's never too late to do that. Well, as a music teacher, I always say it's never too late to learn an instrument, or it's never too late to learn to sing, because I do believe that everybody should experience music, and it really is never too late. You just play something, pick it up and play it. Some people, I think, they say, oh, I'm too old, or my time is gone, my time
Yeah.
has passed, and it's no, as long as you're still living and breathing, you can do music. So I would say that first, and then to explore, if you're thinking about exploring the music of your own people, like of your own culture. Yeah, absolutely, because exploring the music of your own culture, wherever you come from, helps you learn about yourself more. And I think that's something that we should probably all strive to do, is to know ourselves better. Because before you can help anybody, you have to know yourself, right? That's something that I think about a lot, is before you can help others, you have to help yourself. And how to help yourself, you have to know yourself, know your weaknesses, know your vulnerabilities, know what challenges you, and work on those things so that you can be stronger, so that you can help other people. And that comes from the teacher lens. It's like, you can't help students if you haven't gone through those things yourself. Like, if you haven't gone past your own, recognize your own biases, or gone through your own challenges, and like know what it feels like to have the challenge of, like the difficulties of learning a new instrument, for instance. You have to have that experience. And then you can kind of empathize with students as they begin their musical journeys, and be like, yeah, I was there once, and I have a tip for you. Like, I've been there once, and here's how you can surpass that, right? Here's how you can overcome that challenge and be successful on this instrument, or on your voice, or whatever it may be.
Like, really, you gotta not just talk the talk, you gotta walk the walk, pretty much.
Exactly. That's right. That's right.
Yeah, and I can tell you're doing both. You're talking the talk and you're walking the walk. What else are you working on? What do we have to look forward from you? Because you have your author, you have these books or published that you've already published. You have those films, and you're still teaching and educating. But what more are you looking forward to?
Well, my next dream, I guess, project is something that I guess I have started in a way, is like traveling to different countries to explore what Vietnamese music making is like, and then eventually writing about it. So, I need a lot more trips to France and,
Yes.
and Germany, and then other places around the world. I'm really interested in There are people who cross the borders, Vietnamese refugees who cross the borders into Thailand. So there's people there. I would love to meet Vietnamese people in Thailand, in Hiroshima, who I met over the summer. I met a group of people who work with Vietnamese refugees and immigrants in Hiroshima, which is fantastic. And, just to kind of get to know the world a little bit more. So that's a big project, right? To have to travel around, but it's exciting to me.
Yeah.
To travel around and to just discover, like, the Vietnamese diaspora and how they make music.
Wow. I really love how you're expanding your horizons beyond just your local community. You've really grown outside of that. You started in Orange County,
Yeah.
grew up there, and now you're over here doing the
Yeah.
work, and you have plans to travel around and tell those stories. I think, yes, I am very excited to see what else you come up with. I
Thank
really
you.
loved the film that I saw recently from you. And also, if you can, please check out the film that she also helped produce, which is called The Resting Place, through the Chinese Reconciliation Foundation in Tacoma. You can watch the film on their website, and I will link it in here. And
Thank you.
Yeah, is there any final words or anything that you want to share, close up this very in-depth conversation? We've touched on a lot of things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say something that has stuck with me in the past week, because we did the screening of Songs of Little Saigon last week and we had our panelists. And one of the panelists said to remember that, in order to support people, you have to speak up and you can't be silent. And so, everybody out there, I guess that's my last message is don't be silent and speak up and support people who really need it.
Yes. Your voice matters, and I think that we tend to sort of hold ourselves back because we don't think it does or think that anyone's going to listen, but I promise you we can hear you and your voice will be heard. And you can see that through all the work that Tina has done, all the effort that she has done to make our voices heard. And there's so much opportunity for you to share out what you think. And if you want a more humane world, better communities, for us to take care of each other, then you got to do the work too and be a part of that. It's not enough to, now it's just not enough to just say it. You really have to, get your hands dirty a little bit and get to know people in your community. If you want to see that change, you have to be that change. And I think that's something we're now learning with everything that's going on in this country and the climate of things, is we really got to show up for each other.
Yeah.
So I appreciate you saying that.
Thank you. And I appreciate you too. Thanks so much for having me.
Yes, thank you for coming. I really appreciate it. I was so excited to interview Tina because she's really such an amazing person. I don't think I said your last name, actually.
Oh, I don't know if you did.
I saw that your middle initial is A. I was wondering what that stood for.
Oh, well.
If you don't mind sharing.
The A stands for Agnelli. Agnelli. Agnelli, which is actually an Italian name.
What?
And that comes from my mother, whose maiden name was Agnelli. And then my dad's last name is Huynh, Huynh. Yeah.
Whoa.
So.
Oh, I think you did mention something about your family having ties to Italy, and even now to this day, right? You have family. over
Yeah,
there.
my mother's father was Italian, of Italian citizenship. Yeah.
Oh, wait, doesn't that make you Italian too?
It kind of does, but I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
You're not out here repping Italy though.
I'm not sure. Well, I can't. I need to learn how to speak Italian first, and before I can even say anything about that. Yeah, my mother's father was Italian, and so when she fled in '77, she went to Rome because she had Italian citizenship, and then she eventually made her way to Wisconsin and then to California.
Wow, what a jump.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes. Well, it's crazy, and that all led to you being here and existing here.
That's right, because my parents didn't meet each other. They didn't know each other in Vietnam. They met each other in Southern California, and then they had me. So if it weren't for the war, I would not exist.
Literally.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, I'm glad you do exist, and I'm really glad
Aw.
that we met. It's been so long,
Yeah.
and like just seeing the things that you've been doing is so inspiring to me, and I'm really looking forward to what's next.
Yes, me too.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks so much.
Tina. Love you. I appreciate it.
Too.
Well, just closing it out, feel free to comment or give your insights on what you think. If you want to see Tina come back and answer some questions, we would love to hear them. So feel free to engage with us. We're totally open to it if that's okay with you.
Yeah, sure.
And I would love to hear what y'all think. So we will catch you on the next show. Thank you so much for tuning in. And I hope y'all have a wonderful evening, wonderful day, evening, morning, wherever it is, what time it is, wherever you are. All right, closing out. Bye, y'all.
Bye.